What are the different ways to make money as a musician?
When we were kind of first getting serious in music, we thought there's really a lot of opportunity to do music licensing. And so we were really working hard to try to get songs in TV shows and video games and other things. And so we had a song in one of the Dance Dance Revolution games. We had a lot of songs on kind of mostly smaller reality TV show kind of types of things. But there was some revenue in that world. And I think as with all things that look too fruitful, everybody kind of rushed into that space, and so that there was a decline in that. And so there's still opportunity in licensing, and we still do some licensing of our music. We have some music on stock sites. We have some music available for licensing other ways, and we do make some revenue that way. A lot of my friends who are musicians, who are full-time musicians, they do session work, so they get hired to come in and play on recordings. They also, many of them play in what's called a general business band, where they are performing usually covers or something else like that, and they're playing at like weddings or kind of other events along those lines. So those are the main areas. I think original music, we have some revenue from Spotify, and now CD sales are basically over with completely. I don't think even anybody really approaches that too seriously anymore. But there are streaming services where we get some revenue. We get revenue from plays on YouTube, believe it or not. And so, there are still some streams, but I think as with film, anybody who is serious about music needs to kind of diversify what they're doing, because you can't just say, I'm going to play in a band, write songs, sell CDs, tour, and make enough money. That's a really rare thing. And even bands that are, I see articles almost every day about bands that you would think are quite successful saying that going on tour just is not viable for them. They're not going to be able to break even on touring, especially with gas prices and other kind of inflation issues right now. So.
And what about the whole we'll sell merchandise theory?
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, you can make money on that. Certainly, we used to sell shirts and other things like that. But yeah, I don't think the revenue streams are strong enough to really make a living that way. I know that was the argument when streaming was first coming out, that yeah, you lost your record sales revenue, but you'll just make it up in touring and in merch and other things like that. I just don't think that's true for 99.9% of musicians. Now, most musicians, this is also something to think about. There's that sort of argument, but most musicians also didn't make a living selling CDs. In the 90s, even in like sort of the heyday of the highest prices for physical media and for selling albums, and where many albums were going platinum, there were big sales in the music industry. Most people that I've met and talked to who played in bands at that time, even bands that were moderately successful, bands on MTV and such, weren't really making a great living, or were only making a living for maybe a year period or a 2-year period before it kind of went bust. So, as in all arts, whatever amount of money you think anybody is making doing whatever they're doing, they probably are making less money.
At what point should a filmmaker expect to make money from their movies?
That's a really hard question to answer. I think I've come around. If you had asked me this a few years ago, I would have said, you should take some time, make the best art, worry about the money later. But I've come around to where you have to take it, if you want to be able to do it sustainably, unless you're just wealthy and you don't care about it. If you want to do it sustainably as a career, or you want to be able to continue making movies in a reasonable fashion, you have to really think about making money, I think, almost as soon as you're starting to make serious films. And I'd say, if you're just doing shorts, so some people start out doing shorts, doing festivals with shorts as kind of calling cards, and I would say not to expect to make money doing shorts. I don't think there's really much of a viable income stream for that, though maybe, some a little bit. But once you start making features, I think you have to immediately think like this needs to be monetized to the degree, at least to the degree to which I can continue making films, and to which I can demonstrate that the films I make are breaking even or profitable, because that's what's going to make people in the industry want to hire you or work with you or give you money to make something else. So I think even just to sustain any kind of career, you have to place that as an important factor.
And also, too, putting yourself in a position where you won't be straddled with so much debt.
Right. That's definitely a big issue. I think, with any filmmaking, most indie stuff, most kind of starter stuff, it's filmmakers paying out of pocket, or the family, or somebody kind of paying for it, and it really is a big burden if you're taking debt to do it. You can't make more films. I mean, you can't continue making films. You have to find a way to raise that, and it's very stressful. It takes years off your life, and that's not. I don't want that happening to people. I want them to find a way to kind of be able to do it sustainably.
Sure. So living below your means, it's also part of like a whole lifestyle.
Yeah.
In some ways, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to find a way to budget your life such that you can create what you want to create. And we have a lot of friends who are filmmakers who they're waiting for their $1 million to show up to make their first feature film, because they think, this is the film I want to make. I need $1 million to make it. I'm just going to keep asking people until they give it to me. And we've taken the opposite approach, where we say, well, what's the most amount of money we can scrape together reasonably and and comfortably, or the most debt we can take on reasonably and comfortably, and then what is the thing that we can make with that amount of money, and we make that, and then we move on to the next movie. It's not about stopping there and saying, we're done, we've made our great masterpiece. And I worry that people who are waiting for that money will be disappointed when if they get their $1 million and they make their film, if it's not, their career doesn't explode, what do they do next? Wait around for the next opportunity like that? I don't know.
And it's also a form of continuing education, because you're getting better with each one, or you're learning, okay, that didn't work, let's never do that again, or that did work.
Right. Absolutely. I always say that we try to make new mistakes with every film. We try not to make the same mistakes. We always find new mistakes to make. And yeah, every time it's an opportunity to explore something new, to learn from what you've done before, to try something different, and to be more skilled at what it is you do. Hopefully you're getting better. I mean, maybe not every filmmaker is getting better with each film, but you would hope that if you're paying attention to what you're doing, you're paying attention to the response. And I am a believer, a lot of artists want to create and then just say, I'm going to ignore the audience. I'm just making what I want to make. I don't care what anybody says or how they respond to it. I'm a believer in always paying attention to what that response is, and to paying attention to what kind of feedback you get. Now, a lot of that can be feedback for different reasons. There are many trolls out there, things along those lines. So you have to learn how to disregard the kind of meaningless stuff. But when you hear 50 people saying the same thing, you say, okay, they're not wrong. I must be wrong. It's not the 50 people who are wrong. And it's an opportunity to get better at especially writing or crafting or structuring or editing. That's something that we've definitely learned from our first film to our most current. And there's still many, probably another 20 films of growth ahead, something like that.
How much easier is it to make money as an artist today as it was, let's say, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, I think in film, it was probably, if you were making something that was watchable or sort of serious, it maybe took more money going in, but I think that there were more opportunities in the marketplace to make that money back or make some money. There were bigger, a general movie that got a release made more money 15 years ago than it does today. And when I look at data, because I see data for indie films right now, and I mean, it's like mind-blowing how little money high percentage of films make. I mean, most of them make almost no money, almost none. I'm not even talking about not breaking even on their budget. I'm saying they make less than a few $1,000s in revenue. So I think it's very, very difficult now to make a lot of money unless you have kind of the connections to the bigger sales streams, or you're making a sale to an outlet that's going to just pay outright. If you're trying to do it at a consumer level, like in the past, you might have sold DVDs. That was a big marketplace 10, 15 years ago, probably 20 years ago at this point. Now you just don't have that. A consumer who wants to watch your movie is going to watch it streaming on Amazon. You're going to be paid 1 cent for that. That consumer, if they had bought your DVD, you might have made $5 on that previously. So I think it's much, much harder to actually make a big sum of money than it was 20 years ago.
And both you and Sophia made a decision to no longer have Blu-rays or DVDs made at some point?
We don't do them ourselves. So we don't sign Blu-ray deals that are kind of typical label deals, and we don't manufacture them ourselves and sell them. But we have done certain kind of limited run types of things. As an example, there is a great company called Horror Pack that is a subscription service. So every month, people who subscribe to it get 4 Blu-rays or DVDs, depending on which package they subscribe to. And it's a surprise. They don't know what's going to be in the box. But one of those every month is a special limited edition. It's a kind of an indie film that Horror Pack is working with the artist to release the film on Blu-ray. And these are all films that would never get a Blu-ray release otherwise. And we've done that a couple of times because it's a guaranteed revenue. So they basically say, we're going to make X number of copies. We're going to pay you some amount of money per copy, and you don't have to do anything else. We're just sending them. You don't have to sell them. You don't have to convince people. We're just going to send it out to our subscribers, and those people who are enthusiastic horror fans. So it's great. Those are the people you want. You want your movie in their hands. It just gets sent out to them, and you just get paid. So that has worked out well. But there are fewer and fewer of those types of opportunities.
Because there still is probably a small audience that does want those physical, media as a collector's item or whatever.
Right. Yeah. There are a lot of boutique labels that are doing kind of Blu-rays. I think they're all abandoning DVDs at this point, but they put out special packaging for Blu-rays, and they have kind of a rabid fan base where there's a few thousand people who go and buy very expensive actually sometimes packaging for strange releases and old releases and restorations and things. And so there's definitely a fan base for that, and collectors who want those, kind of want to look at their wall in their house and see. Sometimes they don't even unwrap the movies. They just want to see them on the wall there. But I think a general movie consuming audience is less and less interested in physical media.
I have a quote from you. No one really knows what's going on in the world of film anymore concerning selling a movie.
I think it's true. It's interesting because I am in a lot of sort of Facebook groups and other kind of community groups, and you see people talking about, somebody will come in and ask a question like, how do I do this type of distribution, or how do I deal with this? And you see there's 20 different answers. And what's interesting is not just that there are 20 different answers. It's looking at who the people are who are giving those answers. Because if you see somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, they're still giving advice from like 20, 25 years ago. And you see stuff, you're like, none of this applies. I mean, I've been dealing with this, this year. None of what they're saying applies at all anymore. We always say, if we're looking for advice on a distribution company or a distribution outlet or a revenue stream from a streamer, we always say, like, if it's information older than 6 months ago, just disregard it, because that's how fast things are changing. So you can't even if you think you know what you're doing, you think you know how to sell a movie, you think you know where the money lies, by the time you make the movie, things have changed. It's all over. For a short period, we were actually making enough revenue on Amazon, for example. They were paying 15 cents an hour for streaming on Prime. And we were making enough revenue from that we said, look, if we make another 2 movies that are kind of doing as well as this one movie we was doing, we're set. Like, we can survive just making movies at this level. We can pay for the movies. We can make enough money to live on. And then we started thinking, like, we have this whole business plan. It's all going to be great. And like 2 months later, Amazon's like, we're 15 cents. No, we're going to make it 6 cents an hour. And we're like, okay, maybe we can still make something work. And then 6 months later, it was 1 cent an hour. So you can't rely on anything. You can't make any plans based on what the current state of the market is, because it is such a rapidly changing thing. And a lot of times the people who are, if they made a movie a few years ago, they really think, they're like, my movie was successful. I sold it to Netflix. I did this thing and it's great. But they don't even understand like how those deals have changed. That, maybe Netflix is no longer really buying independent content. They're only producing their own content. We make most of our revenue now on Tubi, for example, on AVOD. But I fully expect that 6 months from now, maybe somebody watching this will have already experienced this, but a few months from now, Tubi will have dropped all the indie films and will only be doing studio films or something along those lines. So I never rely on anything. Anything I think is working, I never am going to rely on that for the future.
Did that happen with Amazon as well, where they stopped taking certain indie titles?
Yeah, they dropped a lot of titles as well. They changed their whole kind of business model or idea of what Prime Video was, because for a while Prime Video was kind of a repository of every, they sort of thought like, well, let's just put every movie on here, allow anybody to put a movie on here, and let the consumers kind of decide what they want to watch, and if they watch it, then the revenue goes up. If they don't, it's not there. But now they're very selective about independent films, especially, and they don't accept many films for Prime. It's actually quite hard to get a film on Prime. Which is funny because it pays so badly that you almost don't, from my perspective, I almost don't even care if a film is on Prime because I don't really want that poor revenue. I'd rather somebody watches it somewhere else and we get some kind of revenue from it.
What about IMDb TV? Can you make more money off of that than Amazon Prime?
Yeah, so I think IMDb TV, I think they changed the name to, is it Freevee now? I believe the name has changed to Freevee. And it is like a Tubi style thing. And I think they're viewing it as like, this is what we used to do with Prime, where we're going to accept more material. It's going to be ad based, so the revenue is AVOD. So there's an opportunity that if your film is being watched, you can actually get paid reasonably well. I think we only have one film on that service right now, and I don't think I've actually seen revenue from it yet. I don't think it's been long enough to see revenue from it yet, so I'm not sure of the numbers, but from what I've heard, it is actually has a promising future.